Literally, I woke up from sleep last night and my brain had a very distinct direction it wanted to go. Having dreamt about some of my favorite science fiction television series, or something about them. I can't remember what really inspired that moment, but I remember waking up and going like, all right, yeah, so we don't have to worry too much. We've still got a little time. We can fall back asleep. My brain goes, but what if we wrote ideas for stories in our favorite science fiction series? And cool. Let's do that at some point, but let's get a little extra sleep right now. My brain goes, there are a lot of them. We could do a bunch of stuff. I went, yeah, I'm sure there is, but let's try to get a little extra sleep. And my brain goes, but some of them might be too hard to do. And I'm sure they wouldn't be too hard. I'm sure we could figure something out. I go, oh yeah? What are you going to do for? And then it starts listing off different series. And I'm like, oh, now I'm just going to be awake for the next 2 hours brainstorming ways to do this. So if I have to go through that, you have to go through it. No, I mean, that's mainly just me joking. But literally, I woke up this morning and my brain goes, Farscape, Firefly, Star Trek The Next Generation, and Deep Space Nine. What were some of the others? I was just like, really? You're just going to drop those in my lap when I'm trying to get some sleep? And he goes, yep, absolutely. So we had Men in Black, Firefly, Star Trek, Farscape, and Stargate. And I'm like, come on, really? It wouldn't take too much to do something like that, or a organization that handles the fact that fairy, it's not high on my priorities list to do right now. And then Farscape. All right, what about Farscape? Yeah, I'm sure we can figure something out. And then my brain goes, but you can't do anything for Stargate. I'm like, why not? And my brain, and I'm like, why not? It's like, because the whole premise of the show is you have a magical a magic sci-fi, like Stargate SG1. The premise is they uncover a piece of ancient alien technology that can transport you to other worlds buried in Egypt because we threw off our evil overlord oppressors. And it's like, that type of story, that's too hard to come up with an idea for. And I'm like, no, I'm sure there's a way. And my brain just kept poking at it from all sides. And eventually I said, like, rings that transport you to other locations. All right, well, there's an easy way to go to this direction. Take my standard format of saying, all right, so we have a sort of a modern day science fiction series. It's going to lead you to aliens and spaceships and ray guns and that kind of thing. So this is Stargate SG1. Standard format, reverse things. So Stargate is the military uncovers this and sends groups of military and scientific people through to explore. So what if we did a group of rebels or a private organization rather than a military? But then I got to saying, like, okay, the other thing we need to reverse is science fiction transportation gate that takes you to a place with spaceships and ray guns. Well, the opposite of that, and as far as my frame of reference goes, is what if this is a fantasy? And at first I'm like, well, okay, so you build an archway or something into a temple that transports you to what? Other planets? Heaven? Hell? What? That's a possibility. You could do that. There's a temple with doorways to various hells. But I got to thinking, like part of the appeal of Stargate SG1 over the movie The Stargate was that you had a network of gates. So you had a place to start that would transport you to multiple different places, and you're just constantly exploring. You're leaving home, exploring, coming back home every episode. So having this leave home, go somewhere, come back to home base every time is part of what makes Stargate SG1 its standard format storytelling. It's the equivalent of a Star Trek episode where you start on the ship, you go to an exotic place, and you come home. That's your episode. That's how you make episodes about it. The movie was the gate is uncovered and it only leads to whatever the world was. And they go there, they uncover the alien who has dominated over the human beings he took as slaves to that other world when the gate was buried. So, if we were going to encounter powerful, mystical, magical, technological beings, and they have humans as servants that worship them. So I'm like, okay, so what's the fantasy equivalent of that? I'm trying to think. I don't know a lot of fantasy settings that have something quite equivalent to that, but it's not unheard of either. But to my mind, the very first thing that peeked its head in on me when I was doing that was going, and it's usually more clear in the middle because the fungus has destroyed or is feeding on the plant matter in that circle so that it doesn't grow like a field of wheat would. So when you're in an area and you see a fairy ring, it's sort of like this barren patch that's mythologically there because the fairies were dancing in a circle in that location, and it wore away enough of us into a fairy ring, you'll end up in the realm of the fairy. And I'm like, yeah, that could totally work. So you could have a fantasy setting in which you have a human population and maybe have an order of ring to find something valuable, or treasure hunters, pirates. You could do any one of those things, just a loose-knit group of people who are looking to explore and gain advantage that way. So maybe you set up a realm where there's a kingdom that's harsh and oppressive, and these are Robin Hood and his merry men, essentially. They rob from the corrupt government and rich people, and they give their gains to the poor and needy. And so they're looking for a way to find some more valuable things that can help them in their mission to resist the corrupt kingdom or something like that. And they start noticing fairy rings in the realm. And maybe even members from I believe the Stargate SG, the first movie was somebody using a Stargate to travel to an alien world to find out what they could find there, and if they found anything that seemed threatening, to blow it up, so that this doorway onto the front step of Earth wouldn't be a danger anymore. People on the other side bury their gate, so nobody's getting through that gate. If that's the case, then how did a group of people come bursting through the gate, attack the base, and steal human beings to be their servants? And so now we have to figure out where they came from and how to get back there and what to do. And that's when you uncover this is a doorway to many, many worlds. Now, if you take that same premise of people traveling through a fairy ring to an area of fairy realm and having a sort of conflict there, and you can subsequently follow it up with fleeing from the fairy realm and coming back to the world they belong to and disturbing the fairy ring or burying it or whatever, only to find that within a period of time, maybe some fairies come through and abduct a child. And maybe this is the Unseelie Court. The trooping fairies or some other section of the fairy realm. And they've come and they steal some children and leave changelings in their place. And so it's tracking down and using the changelings as sort of hostages to take you back to where your children have been taken. You follow them and you seek them out and you get into a conflict. And like in Stargate SG1, you have one of the servants of the opponent is able to be convinced of the falseness of the leadership. Now, here's the question I have. If you have a servant population and a ruling class, do we build the ruling class to be the Fae and the servant class to be previously stolen children who were raised among the Fae? I think that has about the same feel. I mean, to be soldiers and mercenaries for them, or not really mercenaries, guards and soldiers to serve their gods, and they're hosts to the infant Goa'uld symbiotes. So they've been converted to be hosts that way. And I imagine you could do something similar where you could do children stolen from Earth by the Fae are raised, and you have enough of a population there that humans bred in the fairy realm are not the same as humans bred on Earth. And they are touched by some of the magical influences of the fairy realm. And so they're host to forces that are not usually native to humans. And perhaps they also live much longer of humans in the fairy realm. Now, there's more than one fairy realm, theoretically. The way that the stories are told in different stories seem to say that like they're not necessarily all the same. And so they're not visiting a new planet every week. They're just visiting a new city every week. And there are enough cities on Earth that you could do all, whether or not it's the same planet or what have you that you want to call it, making a visit to the fairy realm, whatever you want to do. There's also Norse mythology that talks about, in Norse mythology, there's the light elves. There are two worlds you can find them in. Then you have Valhalla, which is the honored dead. You have hell for the people who die of sickness or old age. And you have the realm of the dark elves and the dwarves. And so you have like these 9 realms. You've got 3 more realms in the whole mix there that are realms. You have fire and ice or something like that. Actually, I think the ice realm is supposed to be hell. Mythology is a little vague on some of that. We don't have a lot of the details of the actual structure of their cosmology. But that being said, you have roughly the 9 realms of Norse mythology, and of those 9 realms, 6 or 7 of them are inhabited by mystical creatures like giants, dwarves, and elves. And so I think it's about 6 of them, yeah. Although, to be fair, the fiery realm is inhabited by giants as well. So outside of Hell and Valhalla and the realm of the after fashion. And so that possibility of having at least that many worlds, if not more worlds, and if you build each of those worlds to have multiple cities or factions within their cities, you can have multiple gates to different areas of the world, and suddenly you just have a whole lot of options. There's no requirement that we abide by those hard limits of how many places they can visit. So you can literally just visit all sorts of fantasy realms. So you could do Never Never Land. You can do the Land of Dreams. You can do all sorts of visitations to other realms by traveling through these fairy rings that connect one place to another. Now, the question I have for some of that stuff is, if you go through the ring, do you have a limited amount of time before you're stuck there? If you don't go back through, oh, good Lord, the hiccups. Go back through. Yeah, I just ate before I started this video. I guess I ate too fast. So if you travel to the different fairy realms, is there a limit to how long you can be in each of those locations? Or do you need to gather certain things to be able to come back through? What's the deal? Is it certain conjunctions of the moon or something that you have to get right? So that there's that 3 nights a month you have a full moon kind of thing, where it settles into a new full moon or a new moon on one night. The middle of the new moon or full moon is on another night, and then he starts to get out of those phases the next night. So you have that sort of 3-night window when you have a full moon. And I mean, you could do something like that. So once a month, you have the ability to access these fairy rings and take them to the other end, to wherever they are. Or maybe each gate has its own time frame. And if I do think it would be interesting to have a couple stories where you do I mean, I don't want it to be the entirety of the story, because part of the appeal of an SG1 style story is you leave home and you return home every episode. It's the Star Trek model where you start on the ship, you go an exotic place, and then you come back to the ship. That's how every episode works. It's a self-contained adventure each episode, sometimes with story elements that connect to other self-contained episodes that expand a broader narrative of what's going on over a whole story arc of episodes. That episodic nature is benefited by the idea of always returning to the safe start. And that, like Star Trek The Next Generation particularly, and I guess the original Star Trek to some degree, there's a comfort in the idea that you can always go home, and that the exploration of the exotic and unusual worlds is a and I think it was Stargate Universe was more this sort of refugees stuck in a place they don't belong to and traveling from place to place trying to find a way home. That one's a little less optimistic, though Voyager still maintained a very Trek-like optimism for some of it. But the reason I kind of put a C story, the traveling of Odysseus to try to get home, and traveling through strange realms to do it, or what is it? What is it? What's the Gulliver's Travels kind of story? And that's a model for the kind of thing we can explore here. Is you can literally do a Gulliver's Travel style again, that open doorways to other places. And what do you unleash when you travel to unknown places? I'm going to go with the model of SG1 for this kind of story. If you travel through a Stargate and you encounter the Goa'uld, your first instinct is these are like dangerous invading aliens. But as you start to uncover the storyline that they built during that series, the Goa'uld they're sort of what's left of a population of beings that have not really earned their technological advance. That's a storyline to uncover at a certain point. But the question of, like, do the Fae make the fairy rings? Or, I mean, potentially they can propagate the fairy rings, but are they the creators of the system? Or is this something else going on there? And if that's the case, could our characters in the story, our Robin Hood men and women, I guess, build their own fairy rings, and they have their own flavor? They're not going to be Fae fairy rings. They're going to be something else. And where does that something else lead? Does it open a portal to Hades? Does it open a portal to Vanarheim, which is the realm of the Vanar, which were nature spirits in the Norse mythology, instead of Celtic fairy realms? Or you might even be able to do something like the doorways and tories, which are the Japanese gateways that signify sort of like a threshold between the not quite mystical realm, but the sacred realm and the mundane realm. And so if you tapped into those and made doorways out of those, and the realm you would go to there would be full of Asiatic themed mystical beings. And Stonehenge, build stone arches and whatnot. I feel like if you were to do like heaven and hell kind of concepts, you really should do more of that doorway through a temple arrangement. But this is where I'm thinking at right now, is I like the fairy ring approach first. But maybe it is possible that our attempts to build something similar open portals to places like hell. and heaven, or a heaven, or say the Garden of Eden and hell. I don't think that heaven, as usually imagined by Western culture, is the right kind of place that you would get a place where, like, I don't want it to be like you don't find the afterlife by traveling through these portals. You find other mystical realms. So that's sort of where I went with this today. My brain started my day off with that and wouldn't leave me alone. I could have probably gotten. That's sort of where I am right now. So as much as it's only been a half an hour, I think that's kind of a good place to call it for tonight. But sometimes my ideas hit me out of nowhere, and my brain wants to pose a challenge to me, and me being me, I can't let a challenge like that go, so I play with it. And not every idea is continue to do individual rewriting story settings, or I might come back tomorrow and do more for the Stargate if I want to do a different angle on it. But I did briefly entertain the notion, and I think I did nod off when I was doing this one, so it is a little bit more weird. I briefly entertained the idea that in the future, we have advanced scientific technology, and we think we're doing pretty good. Matrix, Minority Report kind of science fiction setting, where somebody travels to a magical realm with elves and fairies. That I do. There's a certain amount of appeal to that idea of just like, how do you handle cyberpunk or high-tech future or something to that effect? And what kind of story opportunities does that provide? I might also examine a little bit more of that heaven and hell through temple doorways kind of situation. Maybe you have a story there where different temples to different religions have different doorways to different realms. But that one borders on being a little risky, because you have to deal with the fact that you are going to explore religious beliefs about certain places, and you're not going to be gentle about it. Because if I'm going to do a story where you travel into hell, it's not going to be, this is where the wicked dead go. This is literally just going to be a realm full of horned, scaled, tailed, and winged brutish people who are what we model our myths about demons on. But they are just a people of a world that's different than ours. And likewise, a realm that we would anticipate being the realm of heaven may in fact just be a realm of like powerful light-based beings. Doorways there, you might travel to the top of Mount Olympus or to Hades. And Hades has like the Elysian Fields, which are for the non-wicked dead who don't go and become demigods on Olympus. And so you have that opportunity, and you'll probably look at something for Indian or Middle Eastern. If I do Middle Eastern, it's not going to be like Muslim. It's going to be like the pagan Middle Eastern, the Middle Eastern, where their spirits were the jinn. And Asiatic, so you do some of the Chinese mysticism, and Japan. Depending on where you go, if you build these certain types of doorways and you know how to trigger them, they take you to other worlds and other realms. And for the most part, we've mostly forgotten that. But there are a few people who know how to tap those doorways. And there's sort of been like secret traffic back and forth over the centuries, but it's like nobody on either side of those doorways really remembers those old highways. I sort of already started working on that right now, so I said I'd probably save it till tomorrow. I might also, but I'll see what I can figure out. All right, I think I'll call it there for tonight. Well, 40 minutes, that's not super bad. So I thank you for swinging by, catching what I'm working on tonight, and I will catch you for tomorrow, theoretically. Yeah, tomorrow's Sunday, right? I don't know what day I'm on anymore. Yeah, tomorrow's Sunday. So I will catch you tomorrow for Sunday. Hopefully my audio is doing all right. I have noticed recently that it doesn't come out quite the same when I listen onto my laptop, so I'm wondering if I need to do some fiddling with that. Good night. Have a wonderful weekend. I think I have a couple other things to do for videos today. I did a couple taste tests today. And then I'm back tomorrow. And where do I